Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and it's about time we take a deep dive into the issues that have engulfed our polity lately. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on Monday unveiled to the world an 8-point agenda to turn around Nigeria's economy and better the lives of all Nigerians. President Tinubu's roadmap for the economy to get Nigeria out of the wood includes food security, ending poverty, economic growth and job creation, access to capital, improving security, improving the playing fields on which people and particularly companies operate, rule of law, and fighting corruption. Like many other administrations in the past whose beginning always come up with beautiful templates raising the hopes and dreams of every Nigerian for a greater nation of their heritage, only to be dashed at the end due to lack of implementation of this blueprint. This morning on our Daybreak show, we will be looking at Tinubu's renewed hope mantra as we dissect this economic roadmap for a better Nigeria. We have in the studio Dr. Emeka Orjih, Finance and Development Strategist. Dr. Orjih is a former Assistant Country Director of the U.S. government agency at the United States African Development Foundation. It's a pleasure to have you back in the studio this morning.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, last week, rather the last time you came, we were looking at what was ideal. Now we have a proper blueprint to begin to dissect if these are the things we need and what we can do differently. At any rate, on a face value, they don't look any different from what all of the other governments have always told us they wanted to do, from the Obasanjo's administration to the 7-point agenda of Yaradua, to the agenda set by Buhari and the ones he chose not to mention in his second term. It's always been about the same thing. Were you excited anyways when these blueprints were released?
Okay, so thank you very much. Firstly, I'm not sure we can call it a blueprint yet, because the details are not there yet. They promised to release the details. I've not seen them, so we're still dealing with the highlights. And the highlights list these 8 things. And those 8 issues are the regular issues that everybody knows about. They are the regular issues that everybody has been mouthing about over the years. Like you mentioned the Obasanjo administration, you mentioned Umaru Yar'Adua's administration. They all had, 4-point agenda, that point agenda, and they all revolve around similar things. End poverty, create jobs, economic growth, enabling environment, security. They all revolve around the same thing. Question is, will it be implemented? That is the main question, and that is what we hope that this administration will do differently. I say hope because we survived the other ones. But looking at our current indices and looking at the environment generally, if we don't get it right this time, it's going to be a much more difficult survival journey for us as a country.
Yeah, but Doctor, I'd like to get your take on what you make of the body language of the administration itself. It surely has been very busy talking about ideas, setting up committees and things like that. Do you think that his body language is any different from what we've seen in the past?
Okay, so let's speak about that body language. Signaling. What has the signal been? Firstly, today's date is 29th?
30th, I think.
30th. So this was announced on the 29th. So that's precisely 3 months, right? So 3 months to come up with this is not positive body language. It's not positive signaling. The president won an election in February or March. He was sworn in May. So between when he won an election and May was about 3 months again. That was enough time to start to... In February, for instance, we all knew already. We all suspected that Wale Edu would be Minister of Finance. Today, he is Minister of Finance. So, no surprises. My point is that this, and he's the coordinating Minister of Finance. So, he would have been the one that coordinated this program, right? So, my point is, this could have started in March. They could have started
Is
prepping themselves.
Is it necessarily
so they
different?
hit the ground running?
Yeah. Is it necessary that at that time we're dealing with a manifesto, a campaign manifesto, which is tied to the Renewed Hope agenda? But this time around, this is a sub part of that grand manifesto itself. Of okay, this is the working plan of how to get this manifesto going. Is there a chance that this is what we're dealing with? For instance,
I don't,
because there is a manifesto before this agenda was released.
I don't think so. Manifestos are for elections. Yeah, they are originally drawn up to win elections. To say this is what I'm going to do if I win. Okay, so they won. They won. Let's discount the few days in February. So they had the whole of March. They had the whole of April. They had the whole of May, up until the second to the last day of May. It's a full 3 months. Translating a manifesto into a working plan shouldn't take more than 3 months with the level of operation that we have seen Mr. Tinubu operate at. He's been a governor. He has been a national leader of the National Party for many years. He is a relatively exposed and smart guy. You know, he should have, I think that he should have set the ball rolling a long time before
What
that,
do people
especially since he had his core team.
What do you say to people who say perhaps the administration is just doing its due diligence? I mean, the Federal Executive Council was just formed just a week ago, a little over a week ago, right? And this is perhaps the people within the Federal Executive Council getting an opportunity to perhaps present something tangible to Nigerians by way of sharing their ideas, their blueprint, or their agenda, even though we don't know the why of the conversation yet, because they've not necessarily given us the whole roadmap. But they've given us an idea, and we're hearing from the ministers after their inaugural Federal Executive Council meeting. Is it safe to say that this is just all part of the due diligence process?
I hear what you're saying, and it's within the realms of possibility, but let's not miss one thing. And what I'm thinking let's not miss is the Federal Executive Council was announced last week. It's not the fault of Nigerians, right? It could have been announced May 30. It could have been announced June 1.
I mean,
right?
It's impossible for May 30th, because I think that was a Sunday.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay, so it's not the fault of Nigerians. So let's lay blame where blame resides, right? Part of what we were told and part of what we were sold as a nation was that we are going to be getting the most prepared president we've ever had, right? Part of being the most prepared president would have meant that you hit the ground running. Hitting the ground running, especially at a time like this when we are in deep economic and social crisis, hitting the ground running means having your team early to start taking off.
All right.
They didn't do that. So my thing is, you spoke about body language. That body language, we must call a spade a spade. That body language is not positive.
All right. So I'm a bit worried about the manner in which some of the briefings have gone with regards to what these agendas are. Somewhere in the course of the briefing, the coordinating minister of the economy, Waledu, in responding to journalists' questions around what is the state of the economy, he said things are really bad. And I have a problem with this blanket comments. But basically, because if we don't understand how bad things are, we can't measure how much progress you have made from what is supposed to be a bad state. What should have been the ideal brief? I would have thought, for instance, that the ministers would have come out to say, as at this date, this was what we met on ground. This is where we are floating. And by this timeline, we hope to have resolved these issues, and we should be floating here. And somewhere in the middle to long term, this is where we hope to get to. So that at every point of the journey, we can hold you accountable for the things you said. Were you satisfied with just, or was it just a case of not wanting to paint their predecessors bad? If things were bad, they were bad. What's the idea around not wanting to come out with the whole truth?
I was actually, I'm happy that you picked that, because when I was reading the report, I picked that too. And two things came to my mind. Number one is what you just mentioned. It's an APC government taking over from an APC government. So they will be careful, and they will tread carefully when discussing the failings and failures of the previous administration. That's on the one part. On the second part is that things are really bad. I've looked at the numbers. Things are really bad, and they don't want to panic Nigerians. So I can appreciate that. Then on the third part is things are so bad that digging us out of this hole is going to take everybody really coming to the party.
That's the part
right?
I am really interested in. Are we taking it for granted that Nigerians don't have the capacity to understand, to appreciate the level of how bad things have gone, and therefore moderate expectations? Because the expectations are high. They do not match with the kind of speed we are seeing. We need to understand why you are not taking off. We should be gaining attitude at this time, but it appears we are still struggling with headwinds. And we don't understand why that should happen, because like you said, we have a president who seems to be prepared for governance. Why is this headwind holding? Why are we slow at gaining attitude? We have sufficient educated and sophisticated people in this country to understand and moderate expectation. You don't think that that should have happened?
Well, I don't reside in their minds, so I can't speak for them. So I am speculating when I say what I'm about to say. I doubt that what they met was what they expected. I think that the rot was much more than they expected. I think that they were shocked. That's what I think. That they were shocked with what they met. And I think that may be part of the reason why, suspended CBN governor is still not a free man walking around. We saw the drama around the DSS trying to rearrest him. There are deeper issues. I suspect that there are deeper issues, deeper underlying issues that they were all shocked to see. So I suspect that they were shocked into stupor and silence. That's what I suspect. And they are just coming out and attempting to craft a way out. But I agree with you. There needs to be some improvement in their communication strategy. Just saying things are really bad. Things are really bad can also be misconstrued. You are the coordinating minister of the economy. When you say things are really bad, you've left it to the imagination of people to imagine how bad things are. So it can stretch to any length. They are very imaginative and creative people in Nigeria. We are one of the most creative nations on earth. So you imagine what we can do with that. Things are very bad. It may have been better, like you suggested, that definite numbers and indices are put out there so that at least we can measure, like you said, we can measure progress. Because they now face the danger of delivering progress, but because the progress is not as much as we expected, right, public expectation, we now say they haven't done anything. So they face that potential that they could get work done, but they have not been seen to get work done.
Yeah, but isn't that in itself also a strategy to buy time? Because we've seen the Bola administration back in the first tenure do that over and over about how bad the thing was. I mean, they didn't just stick to the government of the immediate past government of Goodluck Jonathan. They went back to the 16 years of PDP, right, to tell you how bad it was. So they can, if not use it as an excuse when they underperform, but to use it as one of the reasons why you can't really tell how good they were doing because things were really, really bad. Isn't this the same old strategy of saying, listen, you might not be feeling the impact of what we're doing because where we're coming from, and that in itself is supposed to buy them some time with Nigerians with regards to being patient about the deliverables.
I mean, what you're saying is, again, within the realms of possibility. We don't know exactly what's going on in their minds. We can only interpret the actions and the signals that they put out there for us to see, like the words of the coordinating minister of economy yesterday. But something I suspect I am seeing when I watch them operate is that there is coordination is not at its peak, right? So they are going off on different tangents. I'm talking of the leaders now. So the ministers, the heads of the critical corporations, the president, you see them every now and then going off. They're not speaking with one voice. They actually need to get a congruent communication strategy.
So it has to be synchronized.
Yes, they need to get a congruent communication strategy. They need to speak with one voice. Because at this point in time, one of the critical things that you need in leadership when things are bad is a leadership that looks like it knows where it's going, even if they don't know where they're going. You need to look like you know where you're going. You need to inspire that confidence in the people looking at you and saying, oh, we're in trouble, but can this guy take us out of this? Or can this group of people take us out of this?
So in understanding
you need
this,
to inspire confidence.
Yes, in understanding this speaking with one voice, is this just supposed to be about a communication strategy or an action strategy? And I say this because one would have expected, because of so much noise that was made about how things would be different, that at the point, okay, you failed to give us, to attach portfolios to these ministers when they went to the parliament. So the grillings were not anything deep. They were just shallow and done around people's primary area of competence or qualification and all of that.
Training.
Now you have assigned portfolios. Would it have been enough to just assign portfolio and assume that the person you have sent there understands what needs to be done, and therefore you leave that responsibility to his imagination? Or they would have come in form of KPIs. These are the priorities of this government as they feed into our larger visions. These are the timelines we are looking at. What we need you to do is to drive this thing from point A to point B, so that the minister doesn't go off, like you said, saying and doing things different that do not feed. Because what would appear is beginning to play out is a jostle by this minister to outshine each other, to appear to the president as to be doing something. And that is where the divergent communications begin to set in. And at that level, the communication guys are just interested in what their principal does, other than how whatever they do feed into the larger framework. How do you think this should have?
It's interesting that you point this out. I say it's interesting because earlier when we were discussing how or why there was that lacuna, there was the suggestion that perhaps the ministers had to come in and get their plans ready, right? So if the ministers had to come in and get their plans ready, then that means there were no overarching KPIs, for instance. There was no overarching grand strategy that, okay, so in this sector, these are the things we want to see. In science and technology, these are the things we want to see. In digital economy, these are the things we want to see. Petroleum, health, education, these are the things we want to see. So that probably didn't happen from the scattergun approach that we see, or the relatively scattergun approach that we see. That probably didn't happen. Now, should that have happened? Of course it should have happened. In fact, the concept of being the most prepared president that we have seen in some time is what should have driven that. Because there should have been some form of a blueprint, let me use your word. There should have been some form of a blueprint from day zero, not even day one, from day zero saying, this is the general direction that will go in this area. We see certain things though, so let's not take it all away from them. Right. We see certain things. For instance, we see that certain blue ocean economies, like I called them here the last time I was here, certain blue ocean ministries and economies have been unleashed, so to speak, emerging sectors. So you look at, there is a reason why a very trusted person to the president is sitting in the Ministry of Solid Minerals. There is a reason for that, right? Even though that is not his field, right? But there's a reason for that. You know, there's a reason why a square peg is in a square hole in the Ministry of Digital Economy, right? So all those points to something. You know, they point to, okay, there's a reason why the Marine Ministry, the blue economy, I think they called it, there's a reason why it was created. Okay, so all those points to that there was some forethought, there was some grand strategy, but it now didn't go, I don't think it went as deep and as networked as you suggested that it could have.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, it's still early days. I mean, it's just 3 months into the administration, while Nigerians don't have all the time to be patient to wait for what possibly is in the making for them as far as the Tinubu administration is concerned. I'd like to also go back to perhaps some 20-something years ago when President Tinubu was governor of Lagos State, because a lot has been said about his antecedents, his track record as governor of Lagos State, and probably the overarching political figure in Lagos State today, the most impactful one over the past couple of years, because you could say that he incubated the likes of the Fasholas, even former Vice President Yemi Oshibanjo, and the likes of them. Even some of the people within his cabinet right now have been working with him for years. What can we learn from his time as governor vis-a-vis what kind of principle he could be to the ministers in the Federal Executive Council today to demand those KPIs are met and all the other things that Nigerians need? What do in his past tells us about what he can do at this moment?
Okay, so let's situate it first. Let's put it in perspective. I ask people, and I'm talking of people that dislike Tinubu, that are not APC people. I ask them a question. Rank the best run states in Nigeria. Best run, which is relative. There are 36 states. Rank the best run states in Nigeria between 1999 and 2007. No, 1999 to 2007. I asked them rank. And then I extend it a bit. I said 2007 to 2015, rank the best run states in Nigeria. Even his biggest critics put Lagos there. They put Lagos on the list of best run. Yeah, so that suggests something. It doesn't suggest he's good. It just suggests he's one of the best. Right? It suggests he's one of the best, at least in administration. We have heard it spoken of him that he is a logistics expert. We have heard that spoken of him. Now, managing a space like Nigeria with all these moving pieces, 46 ministries now it is, and all the 500 and something MDAs, and all the moving pieces that are happening within security and unemployment, uprising, militancy. That's a logistical...
It's a different kettle of fish.
That's a logistical nightmare. Yeah? So it would call to task his vaunted logistical skills. We have seen him do some in Lagos. Lagos was just named one of the worst cities to live in. I think it was in your report. So nobody's deceiving himself or herself that Mr. Tinubu created a world-class city out of Lagos. But in Nigerian terms, in relative Nigerian terms, Lagos has been one of the best run states in Nigeria. I don't think any objective person can debate that. So if he can take some of what he has done before and add to it, hopefully he can do better. I have some reservations, particularly about his team. There are many bright stars there. There are many shining lights. There are many lights down the dark tunnel. But you also look at it and you see that there is a preponderance of political payback. There is if there are 46 ministers there, I would hazard a guess and say that minimum 2/3 of them were political payments. You know, so you are paying. We are in a dire situation, but you are paying people.
Isn't that a necessary evil, though?
Yes, many would argue that it is a necessary evil, and that's where I was coming to. I'm hoping. You know, he made a statement yesterday, cryptic statement. He said, "Don't think." He was talking to his ministers. "Don't think." These are my words, not his words. "Don't think that this is a permanent job. If you don't deliver, you get fired." right?
Do you think he can walk the talk when it comes to that? Because many Nigerians really are saying...
I think he can.
You think he can?
I think he can. And I'll tell you why I think he can. He's on shaky ground now, presently. You know, he's just won an election. There's a tribunal that is still out there. There's all the troubles in Nigeria, the population, a lot of people. I think he's the first president we have had in a long time that has not won the majority of the votes. He didn't win over 50%.
I mean, he had the lowest win percentage.
He didn't win over 50%. The rest of the people have won over 50%. Right? That one. Right? He didn't. He's the first. Right? So there is that relative lack of general acceptability. So he's on shaky ground. The economy is a mess. He's on shaky ground. So you can imagine that, yes, it may be an essential evil that he needs to pay those who helped bring him here.
All right.
Right? But we are hoping that within a year, that those who are not performing well can be rooted out. Because,
a year?
Yes, because political payment, no, I say within a year. Because political payment has been made. And now misused and abused.
All right.
So for the sake of the nation, can we then root those people that are not delivering in line with what Mr. Tinubu said yesterday? Can we root them out sometime in the course of the next 365 days and find better people to take their positions?
All right. Talking about finding better people, I want us to graduate these conversations to how we can begin to deliver on some of the mandates. What's interesting, if you take an intrinsic look at those mandates, is that they are not completely within the realms of government. A lot of them would happen with private sector collaboration,
Absolutely.
with setting the right environment. And
Absolutely.
I say this because of two things. Yesterday, an interesting piece of news that came out had to do with the collaboration between Wiki and the aviation minister to settle compensation disputes that has prevented the second runway from happening.
Right.
That runway conversation has been there from the Jonathan administration. So it's been 12 years of doing nothing because we could not agree on this. At some point, the minister said, let us even advance payment and begin work and we can settle issues around the The assembly became a stumbling block. I remember the Dino Milaye guy in the house kicking against 12 years. And today, if you have a simple issue with the runway in Abuja, you can't land in the Federal Capital Territory. Now, interagency collaboration has settled that, and the minister is saying, I'm willing to pay everything. Contractors go back to site. And even issuing a blanket statement to the committee and say, I am ready to do everything that will make you comfortable, including providing infrastructure in the places we are relocating you to. That's the kind of collaboration that can remove stumbling block on the way. The second one was the statement made by the chairman of Airpeace at the MBA retreat, which seemed to have focused largely on energy. And he talked about the government not being serious about creating jobs and improving environment. As of yesterday, he said he had over $15 million trapped with the central bank because they couldn't access $15 million worth of Naira trapped because they couldn't access forests to carry out sea checks. And so he has over 15 aircraft grounded outside the shores of this country. They can't take back the aircraft and improve service because they can't pay service fee. And that he had applied for a sea check hangar since 2015 that has not been approved, and as a single institution they had paid 75 billion naira to carry out checks outside. That's capital flight outside this country. How much? Tinubu is a private businessman. He prized himself as a private sector person. A number of the persons who made the cabinet are also private sector people. How much of understanding is there really in government about how they are just supposed to be enablers, and some of the visions that they are looking at achieving rest with enabling the private sector and not becoming competitors to the private sector?
Okay, that's a very, what you just asked is a topic we can spend the entire 1 hour of this program discussing, because that's a very deep question you just asked. I would want to assume that they understand to some appreciable level the import of creating an enabling environment. If you look at their 8-point agenda, that was the one, it was there, and it was the one with the most number of words, right? I don't know how many words it had, but I think it had about 9 to 10 words. The other ones had 2 or 3. It had 9 to 10 words. It shows you that, or it signals that they know that it has to be done. We also look at, going back to what you asked, sir, we also look at Tinubu's time in Lagos. We know that he was one of those governors in his time that understood that government should not really be in the business of business, but should be in the business of enabling business. So hopefully he has a better understanding of this than former President Muhammad Buhari. I would actually want to believe that. Okay, so that said, how will this then be done and implemented? Well, there is the fear. There is the fear amongst many Nigerians. That's part of what, that's part of the baggage that Mr. Tinubu came with. There is the fear amongst many Nigerians that Mr. Tinubu has competence in state capture, right? Which means that, which probably means that they are suspecting that not only is he going to enable the environment for the private sector, but he's going to enable the environment for his private sector, right? Now, we don't know how true that is, true or not, but this is what I say. Private sector.
Using Lagos as an example, do you think that that fear is grounded on some facts?
Okay. I will dive into that after I do this. Right. So, be that as it may, there are things, there are areas that the public sector should not be involved in, right? So, whether the private sector that gets involved in it is general private sector, or whether the private sector that gets involved in it is Mr. Tinubu's private sector, let's just call it that, it would still be more efficient than the public sector dealing with it. Okay? I'm not saying that, I'm not advocating that. I'm just dealing with this now strategically. We have 3 options before us. We have option of public sector dealing with something it cannot deal with. We have option of real private sector dealing with it. Then we have option of Mr. Tinubu's private sector dealing with it. The worst case scenario is public sector. That's just the point I'm making. So whether it is Mr. Tinubu's private sector, the best case scenario, of course, is open competition. Because competition, the market, right now the people, 213 million of us, called Nigerians, would benefit if there is that open competition. Once it goes into cronyism and preparing the space for special interests, Nigeria does not benefit as much as it could, even though it may take us a step away and a step further from the rot that the public sector would have left that space in. Now, coming to your trick question, sir. There are allegations in Lagos. You know, there's a company called Alpha Beta. I'm sure most Nigerians have heard of that company. There are allegations that Mr. Tinubu owns Alpha Beta. There is no evidence to that effect, to the best of my knowledge. So we do not know. So these are some things that we cannot say yea or nay. But there is something that we know about Mr. Tinubu. You look at him and his politics, there is something that you see. And that thing that you see is that he has a band of loyalists. He's very good at it. I don't think any other politician in Nigeria has achieved that. He has a band of loyalists, whether they be public sector people or private sector people. He has a band of people who have been following him since. And there must be a reason they're following him.
And you don't want to get into that. I can tell. But I think it speaks for itself. But looking at where we are right now, and we've talked a great deal about expectations and managing them, the hopes of Nigerians and things like that. He's clearly been brutish when he needed to be, especially with that inaugural speech when he just announced unilaterally the removal of fuel subsidy. I didn't need to see the books. He didn't even see, I don't think he has seen his first official file as president when he made that statement. And he's gotten a lot of commendation for that, even though he's got several knocks domestically for taking that decision in that particular manner. But what are we to learn from our past? What sort of pitfalls does he need to learn from the past about how those beautiful ideas, whether it's from the Obasanjo administration, from the Yar'Adua administration, from Goodluck's administration, from Buhari administration, what are those administrative pitfalls that he needs to avoid to get all these beautiful ideas of his up and running and successful? Because, I mean, this is not the first time Nigerians are getting used to some beautiful ideas on a piece of paper that end up flopping at the end of the day. What does he need to do to avoid becoming a flop, like many in the past have over some policies of theirs?
I would just say there are very few things, and I'm sure he knows a lot of them. There are very few things. We're in Nigeria, and we're human beings, and it happens everywhere that there's political patronage and political payments to be made. So there are really things that we can't avoid completely, but there are things that we can limit. My biggest advice to Mr. Tinubu would be to ring fence, identify and ring fence certain sectors and make them immune to political pressure, to corruption, to just, take, there are 40, I don't know how many ministries there are. Okay.
I mean, by design, we have just 26, but now we have a lot more than that, obviously.
26. Let me suggest some spaces that could be ring-fenced, right? Ring-fence education, ring-fence health, ring-fence MSMEs, because they produce 50% of your GDP and 90% of your employment.
That's where the jobs are.
Yeah, you're talking of creating 50 million jobs. That's part of his plan that he announced yesterday. He's going to create 50 million jobs. If you're going to create 50 million jobs, there's only one place that can create 50 million jobs. It's not two places. It's MSMEs. Ring-fence education, ring-fence health, ring-fence MSMEs. If you can ring-fence, just pick any other thing you want.
I'm surprised you didn't start with security.
Let me put it this way. His actions so far suggest that he has not ring-fenced security. Let me just be as diplomatic as I can.
Even with the choice of these service chiefs, with the choice of his NSA, you think?
How about the choice of Minister of Defense and Minister of State of Defense? I hold out hope, right? Let me put it this way. I hold out hope that I am wrong. But security has been a big business. Security was the biggest business in this administration, in this previous administration. Security was the biggest business. I have friends and colleagues who do estates, who do these large estates. And when the economy was really bad under Buhari, I kept asking them, who's buying houses? You guys are just building estates. Who's buying houses? And independently, they tell me the same thing. They say, these soldiers and these security people, and then get money. And so, where's that money coming from? Right? So security has been turned into a business. Can they step away from that? It's a very big ask, but I hope that for the life
Is
of
it impossible for the president to use your word ring fence the area of defense and security and guarantee its efficiency so that even if there is some level of corruption, the output, the output
would outstrip it.
Exactly.
Is not is not impossible. So I would say, so let me go back. I would say ring fence health, ring fence education, ring fence MSMEs, ring fence security, ring fence what I call the blue oceans, the emerging economies. So digital economy, blue economy, arts and creatives,
agriculture,
science, tech and innovation, right? Agriculture, those solid minerals, those places, those sectors that can, let me use the Nigerian lingo, blow. Those sectors that can blow, those sectors that are currently dwarfs compared to their giant potential. Those sectors that are latent, untapped, right? Ring fence them and have the right people sit there.
So if you can just expand on the idea of ring fencing, is that a nice or fancy word of saying micromanage them?
Let me put it this way. To ring fence, there are a few things that should be in place in our context, in the context of Nigeria, right? Ring fencing means, okay, so let me go back to the example you asked me to use earlier. You asked me to use Mr. Tinubu's Lagos to project into what Mr. Tinubu's Nigeria would be. Okay, let me use Mr. Tinubu's Lagos. Mr. Tinubu, after his 8 years as Lagos governor, he had a reputation for ring fencing his governors. So for instance, people say that Fashola did well as Lagos governor, but didn't do well as minister of works, housing and power because he had a Tinubu in Lagos ring fencing him, protecting him from political vultures. He didn't have that here. That's what some schools of thought say. So ring fencing means, one, shielding that area from political influence, undue political influence. You know, so an area starts to do well, a sector starts to do well, and money starts to come in there.
And the vultures come.
Political vultures. Oh, we want to get into there. You know, he needs to be disciplined enough and focused enough to say, no, this is ring-fenced.
Okay.
Because these are the places that will take us out. That's one. Sorry, let me just land this other one.
Right.
The second is corruption. Signal that in those sectors, excuse what I'm about to say, I go live una here.
Yeah, you can have this, but
I
you
go
can't
live
have
una
this
here.
one. Right.
But you see here, signal it. So somebody messes up there, hits that person very hard. It's a signal. In this my ring first sectors, I know they play. You guys can go there and play. Not that I'm not saying that's what it should be. Just get what I'm saying. Because
you can't compromise on certain standards.
I understand that we are a political patronage society. And to completely say that you're veering off that, that's not going to happen. In change management, they'll tell you it's impossible.
It's too disruptive.
Change 101 is a little change at a time, a little change at a time. So if you really want to change, if the intention to change is there, if the intention is not just mass brigandage, if that is not the intention, mass robbery, mass state capture, if that is not the intention, if the intention is actually to rebuild Nigeria, then it has to be taken one step at a time.
Okay.
Education, health, security, MSMEs, and then the blue economies, the blue oceans, which is marine, digital economy, science, tech and innovation, trade and investment, solid minerals,
agriculture.
There's one part of this conversation I would also like us to take into account, because when I listen to you and I take a look at some of the things that this government had mentioned they will do, it signals a lot of reforms. Some of them are going to be brutal reforms. And what happens with reforms is that however good intentioned, it has a way of also throwing people below the poverty line. And my question really is around buffering. Because some of these specialists in these agencies have their mind set at where they want to go. And in getting there, it doesn't matter who's us, it's God. But the people whose us are God are Nigerians who are trying to survive, who have not committed any crime. have been created and designated to come from this part of the country. And how do we approach some of the things we need to do with all of the benefits, attendant benefit it has with a human face, by providing buffers that sort of provide soft landing for people. I mean, you hear all the things about what Wike said. Good intentioned as they may, people are already frightened about livelihood. When you say the woman who sells corn cannot be selling corn anywhere, and the taxi driver cannot park anywhere, even though you are not provided setbacks on your road designs. What it means is because you don't want to see them, you just clear them out of the city. That's a whole bunch of livelihood you are taking out, and all of the attendant effect it will have on their beneficiaries and all of that. How do we, who should have this responsibility of saying, hey, this idea is good, but we cannot ostracize the defenseless in a bid to arrive at this destination? How do we incorporate this buffering and all of this?
There is something called contextual development. Contextual development means that you develop within your own situation, within your own. So, I heard Mr. Wike when he said those words, and what came to my mind immediately was, okay, so you want to deliver a world-class city, and you have looked at world-class cities, yeah, Paris, perhaps, you know, maybe
Dubai.
Maybe Dubai. You know, you have looked at world-class cities and you've taken notes. So in world-class cities, there are no street hawkers. And then you are now going to implement same here. That is not contextual development. That is not contextual development. Contextual development requires a learning and then an adaptation to my circumstances. My circumstances are that I have 134 million people living in absolute multi-dimensional poverty. We are the largest conglomeration of poor people on planet Earth. It simply means that the most important business in Nigeria today, and the fastest way to get Nigerians out of poverty today, is through micro businesses. That's what that figure means. Forget the highfalutin talk about big business, macroeconomic. Those are all good. But if you're going to get 134 million people out of poverty, you are going to run a state of emergency on micro businesses. That's how you get them out. Right? That's the fastest way to, by far the fastest way to get them out. Now, if you're going to run a state of emergency on micro businesses, you may have to trade off in some places, because micro businesses include that woman selling corn on the road.
But is it also safe to say that, you know, his position is not necessarily to take them out of business, but to establish some sort of order in the way we do things? Because there is a lot of, you know, lack of order in some of the arrangements, especially where you see some of these activities taking place, for instance.
I want to assume that that is what he wants to do, but then he hasn't come out to say it. So you are not taking her out of business, you are going to provide order. That comes back to what was just said. How do you buffer, and who should be in charge of that buffer? So there has to be a coordinator. The coordinator in this point, from what I see in their structure, coordination can only happen in two places. One, at the level of the president or whoever the president appoints. For instance, he has an SA in Hadizabala, right? So coordination at that point. The second point is at the Wale Edru point, which is the coordinator of the economy.
Party.
Yes. So there is an overarching cross-functional, cross-cutting issue that says we are not going to attack micro businesses in any way or form. So Wike, Mr. Wike, as you're about to clean up Abuja, that's all well and good. But the micro businesses operating on the streets, we need to devise a plan for them. Because if you leave a Mr. Wike to himself, and Mr. Wike is interested in delivering a world-class city. His concept of a world-class city is to import Dubai or Paris.
Okay.
That's his concept of a world-class city.
I'm sure he would disagree with you, but then again, I mean, it's opinions at this point. But nonetheless, I believe that we've made a lot of gains as far as this conversation is concerned, and unfortunately, Dr. Orjih, we're going to have to leave it here for now. Thank you so much, as always, for your invaluable contribution and for your insight on this talking point. We really appreciate you very much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Orjih. I hope, like Abdullah said, we have brought you valuable information, and we'll continue to keep an eye on that space with all the developments. And once there's any need to take a review of what's happening, you can be sure that Trust TV will be at the forefront of this. This is where we take a short break. When we return, the show continues. Please don't go away.
This is Trust TV.